This poem by William Butler Yeats attempts to reflect the author's view of the world, more specifically the end of the world. He does this by first explaining just how much the world is in trouble, followed by the writer's account of the second coming personified by a sphinx-like character, and ending with the writer leaving the reader with a deep question. In the poem, there is overall no rhyming pattern or definite length of stanzas, which implies a style of free verse writing. By this I concluded that the author wants the reader's full attention on the meaning of the poem, and does not want to distract them with false motives. Things start off in the first stanza with metaphors for catastrophe or otherwise chaos. Yeats portrays the world as a place with no order that is overrun by the worst type of people, filled with passionate intensity. The writer uses this stanza to tell the reader exactly what is happening, or what is wrong, with the world at that time. Eventually the reader is overwhelmed by the interpretation of this world Yeats is describing. In the second stanza, we see Yeats himself reflecting on this terrible world by saying things like surely some revelation is at hand. By stating this he again implies just how bad of shape everything is becoming. Lines 12 through 17 are a change in tone because it is first point in the poem that is not referring to the corruption of the world itself. In these lines the speaker is experiencing the actual event of the second coming. While the imagery in this stanza is very vivid, there are many metaphors for a sphinx-like character as the Messiah. Now the way the speaker talks about the second coming of course is referring to the descent of Christ in the Bible. But the poem is very different from the way the Bible states it. The Christian faith talks of Jesus himself coming down to earth and rescuing all those who are saved. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 52, it says in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, referring that the rapture will happen very fast. Meanwhile the way it is portrayed by the speaker is a vast spirit in the shape of the Egyptian sphinx that moves its slow thighs or goes about whatever it is doing very slowly. This is very contradicting to the Bible's perception of the rapture, which leads me to my first thoughts of the reasoning behind this poem. To me it seems that Yeats is attempting to take a second look or challenge the normal understanding of what the rapture is supposed to be. He does this in many different ways, for instance changing the actual figure that is portrayed to be doing the action, and changing the speed at which the actual rapture takes place. This assumption of Yeats's intention could conclude all of what happens in stanza 2, but the theory almost falls apart to a different theory after ready stanza 3. Stanza 3 is after the rapture has taken place, and our speaker has some time to think to themselves. This thinking allows Yeats to pose the overall question to the readers, which is, and what rough beast, it's our come round at last, slouches towards Bethlehem to be born. This question is basically asking what could have done this, and the way the author uses words like beast and slouches makes the reader imagine something almost repulsive, not the way you would imagine your Lord and Savior. These words add to my assumption that he is experimenting a different view of Christ and the rapture, but they also lead me to my second possible conclusion, and that is wondering whether or not the speaker is perhaps a non-Christian or a Christian who is unaware of any wrongdoing. That may be why the rapture is deemed to look so bad and scary. It is actually just the point of view of the sinner. Maybe the speaker is experiencing some form of the Antichrist. The way the speaker talks, describes the actual event is what really makes me conclude this. In stanza 2, most everything the speaker says to describe the Sphinx like beast is almost scary and unpleasant. Even the way the Sphinx moves, moving its slow thighs, implies fear and worry. So after reading this piece we can definitely conclude that the speaker of this poem is talking about some form of the rapture and different ways to look at it. Depending on your view of the rapture, you could take it either way. It is interesting to note that this piece was written not long after the end of World War I and right before the Great Depression. So this piece by Yeats was actually very well timed considering the outside events going on around the time the poem was written. Maybe the time period the poem was read at could have an effect of the way society views it because of all the references to terrible places and people.